Charot. Good evening kanang. May I ask, unsa gani mga section?
May kay bagong section.
Wala pa sir section sir.
I see. Abi na kung kanang kis sa una magod na amot si. Dili mo black sectioning? Abi na mo black.
Murag dili.
Wala
Sir?
pa sir.
Okay. Sige, salamat. We'll start at 6. 6 naman di ay, no? Give me a minute, then we'll start. Good afternoon, Mado. Good afternoon ninyo.
Good
Yes, sir.
afternoon, sir.
Okay, good. It's okay. Sige, this afternoon or this evening rather, we'll proceed on the next topic, which is on paradigm shift. And then after this one, expect that I'll be giving you a short quiz. It's a 10-item multiple choice quiz. Okay. It's by the way, is my screen visible on your end?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Sige, we'll start. Last meeting, we discussed about interaction of science, technology, and society. If you recall, we discussed several definitions of science, of technology, and then eventually we look into the relationship between science and technology. And one of the famous one of the famous authors was Gardner, who gave to us his his positions about the different interactions. Now, if you recall, there were four, and then eventually we discussed um, on what are the benefits and likewise the disadvantages with the interaction. And I think we wind up with how science and technology informs policy making. Okay, if you recall, we discussed, one of the things we discussed was on the role of science and technology in policy making with respect to environmental problems. Okay, that's only one of the examples. And for now, and also I'd like to reiterate that we discussed previously that scientific knowledge keep on changing, and that's the very nature of scientific knowledge. It is never stagnant. One day we think this is correct. The next day, it's no longer the correct one. In other words, there are changes. Okay, and we need to embrace that one, no? Because basically that's how science progressed and even technology. If it will not change, well, apparently that means to say nga walay gibuhat ang scientist o ang technologist. Okay, this afternoon, we will proceed or we'll discuss on how really kanang scientific knowledge changed. So, what are the mechanisms involved? Okay, and in particular, we'll talk on the mechanisms, the specific processes. Kaya di mo siya pwede maingon nga mo lagi to karon mao ni eksakto niya ugma na invalidate na siya, no? So there must be certain process how a particular idea, knowledge, information changes over time. Okay, and that leads us to our next topic, which is on paradigm shift. Okay, our objective for this evening is that basically identify paradigm shifts in history. Okay, paradigm change or paradigm shift is present, not just today. It happened before, and certainly paradigm shifts will also happen in the future. Okay, so before that, I'd like to ask perhaps two volunteers who can give me their definition of paradigm. In a way, it doesn't have to be dictionary kind of definition or denotative definition. If you have kaning sa patawag ana if you have your own if you have your own definitions, well, that's also kanang or connotative man. If you have connotative definitions or associations with the term, these are also welcome. Okay, we'll begin with Kimberly.
Sir.
Hmm,
Sir, according to my research, sir, para di, unsa nga para
paradigm.
di
Paradigm.
important change that happens when the usual way of thinking about or doing something is replaced by a new and different way.
Okay, so that talks about paradigm shift. And then, how about paradigm, Kimberly? What's man ang paradigm para sa imo? Because the definition that you gave already kanang defines the term paradigm shift. Okay, let's have paradigms. Sige, Kimberly.
Kwan, sir. Paradigm is a widely accepted example, belief, or concept.
Okay, very good. So it refers to a belief, a concept which is widely accepted. Okay, so how about Thank you for that, Kimberly. No? So it's a belief, concept which is widely accepted. Okay. Arita ni Chinny May. Sige, Chinny May.
Yes, sir. So, based on research, sir, is the definition of a paradigm is a widely accepted example, belief, or concept. An example of paradigm is evolution, sir. An example of paradigm is the Earth being round. That's it, sir.
Okay. So, okay. So, yes, okay. That's a very good example, no? Earth being round, that's a paradigm because it's sa imong definition pa ganina, it's a widely accepted concept, no? But we cannot deny the fact po nga napoy mo tuo ka ng flat earth, no? Mabito nga natin gitawag nga flat earth society, no? Kay mao po na ilang take about the shape of the earth. Okay, but when we say earth is round, well, as you said, it's a widely accepted concept, so that makes it a paradigm. Okay, thank you so much, Chinim. How do I pronounce your name? Chinime? Chinay?
Chenny May, sir.
Okay,
Chenny na lang, sir.
okay, Chenny. Okay, Chenny. Sige, for now, kanang we'll try to look into how kanang paradigm is also defined in the context of the literature. Okay, so before that, ato sa ila-ilahon, ato hatagan na to meaning like, you know. So, according to Thomas Kuhn, he is a philosopher. What's that?
Oopsie.
Ano ko admit, ha?
Gusto ba?
Okay, so before yes, now we're going to define what is paradigm according to Thomas Kuhn. So, kinsa man si Thomas Kuhn? Thomas Kuhn is actually a philosopher, which in his life, na-undergo po siya paradigm shift. Okay, but later on, ato na-discuss nga nung may paradigm shift sa kinabuhi ni Thomas Kuhn. Okay, so going back, the definition of paradigm is that these are set of practices that define a scientific discipline at a certain point in time. So, aside from the fact that paradigms are widely accepted concepts, beliefs, views, they're also they're only true or they are only popular at a certain point in time because they may actually change over the course of time. And that is the very reason why in the previous discussion that we had, we discussed that scientific knowledge actually changes. Okay, in other words, scientific knowledge may be considered as a paradigm or is actually considered as a paradigm. So it contains all the distinct established patterns, theories, common methods, and standards that allow us to recognize an experimental result as belonging to a field or not. Why? Because each discipline has their own set of paradigm. Okay, so for example, sa kaning mga sa kaning mga aviation students. So syempre, ang ilang studyhan is ang context sa aviation na dyan, no? Ang katong inyong mga classmates nag-study about kanang hotel and restaurant management. So they're also focused in their discipline. And the context specific knowledge that we have are actually considered as paradigms. So mao na nga kanang if mo shift ka og major, maybe from HM gana ka mag-pilot, so that itself is considered as a paradigm shift because apparently the practices, the things that you learned when you still kanang took up hotel and restaurant management will apparently be changed the moment that you're going to proceed with another or you're going to transfer with another kanang program. Okay, so it's also a comprehensive model of understanding that provides field's members with viewpoints and rules on how to look at the field's problems and how to solve them. Okay, so an example of this one is kaning let's assume no nga naitulok ka engineer nga gasakay og kaning kotse no o sa matong ikuan let's say one is an electronics engineer, ang usa is a mechanical engineer, ang usa kay sa mga engineer pa diha no perhaps an IT. So kanang example na ni klase, all of a sudden napahong ilang gisakyan. So certainly katong tulo ka engineer would look into different kanang things. No, I mean they may kanang attribute they would have different explanations rather why the car suddenly stopped, no? So katong mechanical engineer, basta gahon-ahon na siya nga. Perhaps tungod sa makina, no? Ang katong electronics or electrical engineer, basta ang gihon-ahon na ang battery, no? O katong IT pod, basta ang gihon na basig there is something wrong with perhaps nang imong sakyanan kay kanang high-tech kaayo, so basig na ay nausab sa kanang mga programs. No, anyway kanang hypothetical scenario na siya, no. But my point is different individuals would have different ways in looking things, no. Sa katong example, lain-lain sila og kanang mabasol kay lahi-lahi man ang ilang concentration kay limited man on the field where they belong. So mauna siya, no? And we can actually apply kanang paradigms not only in the context of science, but even in terms of culture, no? Kabantay mo kanang kung buntag ang atong sudan usually kay kanang itlog, hotdog, tocino. If moadto ka sa other places, let's say niadto ka sa lain balay dito ka nakitulog ka, you would expect nga most likely same po nang iserve nila nga pagkaon sa imuha. And even if you go to restaurants, na jud na kay naadmatag mo sa buntag dry atong pagkaon, no? Nya if pagpaniud to na pod, sabaw-sabaw jud na siya, no? So that itself, I mean, those are actually examples of paradigm. It is widely accepted nga if buntag ang atong pagkaon usually dry, no? Nya if paniud to basa-basa jud na siya. So mao na siya, it's widely accepted, no? And again, we need to embrace the fact that paradigm does not only apply in science but in so many things. Okay, so now we're going to study kinsa man jud ang introduce aning paradigm shift. So you have now kanang the basic knowledge what paradigm is. So ato tan-awon if kinsa ang gapauna or proponent aning paradigm shift. So Thomas Kuhn is a trained physicist at Harvard University, and he is very much renowned because of his book entitled The Structure of Scientific Revolution. So for Kuhn, ngayon siya, scientific revolution involved paradigm shifts that punctuated periods of stasis or normal science. Okay, we actually can associate paradigm with normal science. Again, balik ta, it's a widely accepted concept, it's a widely accepted view, and so that's a normal science. So it's a daily reality. Kanang mo na itong usual encounter, no? And if ever we see changes, so we assume that there is paradigm shift. So ang paradigm shift happens in a mesoscale or a microscale or even in a macro scale. Kay even ang changes sa atong attitude, no, that could actually be considered as kanang paradigm shift. Even ang atong growth and development, di ba? Paradigm shift na manggihapon na. Kung huna-huna ang bitaw, di ba? Kung bata pa ka, ang imong duaan, kay dulaan man jud, no? As in, dulaan jud niya ka ng, dulaan niya ka ng mga toys ba, no? Sabi niyang dulaan sa una ba?
Fossil,
Sa Jane?
fossil.
Pusil-pusil, no? Sige, ato na dawato na yung pusil-pusil. Nga, Jane, paabot ni Kuan, Jane, paabot ni teenager, kasi gusto nang idula-dulaan na po.
Paano sir? Basketball, mga sports na sir.
Okay, very good. Kanang sports na po. Duwa na? Para kailangan gidawa-duwaan, Jane?
Ala na sir.
Maayo, very good. Okay, so, kay ang pambayad diha no kanang sabi ka feelings tang duwa ano paawat sa inyong edad no. So gikan sa toys, may sa Jane kay ang gidawaan niya kay basketball no. So tara din abot sa kanang point mga lain na ba tong duwa ano. So kana siya, that is a manifestation nga na paradigm shift no kay syempre if wala if abot ni mo teenager gadula pa yung pusil-pusil paghihapon no. So there must be something wrong. I mean di pa siguro na wrong no. Naana lang siguro to nga mao na ang norm nga if ana nga edad mo nang dulaan nato ano niya pag abot sa ana edad dahil na ko atong dulaan ano. Okay, so nganong niingon ka ganina nga si Thomas Kuhn himself underwent kanang paradigm shift because from a historical philosophy of science to an evolutionary one, from being a physicist, he turned into a philosopher, and there is career shift, and so that is considered as a paradigm shift. Okay, so muna ang mo sa inyo class nga ang paradigm shift, wa siya malimit jud sa kuan, wa siya malimit sa kaning wa siya malimit gani sa kaning sa science, sa technology. Kay again kita no from every now and then
Excuse
no,
me,
we
sir.
undergo
Sorry to
changes.
interrupt. Naay kuan kanang classmate na ko sa kuan sa GC nagreklamo, sir, invalid daw ang link, sir. Like this
Ah,
makasulod.
wait sa nakagi-accept bago lang. Yeah, dito po sa GC na po ako ni open og kaning kuan. Same man ni kay ang akong kuan ang akong Zoom kay mo ra man akong recurrent meeting man gud ni siya. Palihog lang ko kanang kuan, palihog sila pa time ina gani o pa lag ina usab gani if ever gani na problem kanang kindly tell them to use perhaps other devices if na amang galing. Kay so far ako man nakasulod raman. Palihog lang ko ha. Sige. Can I proceed? Or can I continue? Sige, silence means
Sige,
yes.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Sige. So, according to Kuhn, as I said, Kuhn is the author of katong the structure of scientific revolutions, which made him very very famous. So one of the lines sa iyang book niyon siya nga, the successive transition from one paradigm to another by a revolution is the usual development pattern of how science mature. So mauna no nga dito pwede nga kanang ang scientific knowledge is stagnant, otherwise walay progress. So kung atong tan-awon ang atong cellphone sa una, it has limited capacity. Di ba naanad ta nga pang text o pang tawag na jud na ang cellphone ato sa una no. So that was the paradigm before. Okay, well, because of the frontiers of scientific knowledge, we keep on pushing scientists rather keep on pushing kanang with the frontiers, but the frontiers keep on pushing, it keeps on progressing. So mauna nga we see a lot of changes, and so that is also kanang that comes along with the fact nga kanang ang capacities attributes atong mga devices are also improving, no? So from texting, from calling, so karon cell phones are now capable of capturing videos, images. It even worked as kanang it has the same features as our computers. So mao na no, kay correlated man gud na siya no. Di ba if mobalik ka sa science and technology, if naay ka ng progress sa science, makit-an po data sa technology no. So in the same manner, if kanang dili mag-improve ang scientific knowledge nato, so dili ta ma-expect nga ang atong mga devices mo improve pud na siya no. Okay. So however, it is very common for scientists to discard certain models or pick up emerging theories. In other words, normal na po na sa scientist nga ang paradigm or ang scientific knowledge nga ilang gituuhan karon, posible mausab jud na siya no. Mura gud tong moingon ta nga sa una no, if ang uwak kanang crow ba nga itom niya mo to tinuhan sa una kay agma to ang uwak sa una tanang itom. Di ba karon naanay uwak nga puti no? Because kanang that is a manifestation nga ang atong knowledge and information nga available sa ato mo change na siya, and whether we like it or not, we may not at all times discard, but in some point in time we accept new new models, new paradigm, new concepts, new beliefs sa panadiha. So very important, we have to acknowledge that paradigm shift is not a threat to science, but rather the very manner in which it progresses. And I have discussed it in the previous slide. Okay, so this is now how kanang paradigm shift happens. So this is pre-science. We have normal science, we have model drifting, model crisis, model revolution, and paradigm shift or paradigm change. So we're going to discuss one by one, what's in pre-science, what's in normal science, model drift, up until paradigm change. So we begin with pre-science, which is a pre-paradigm stage. And in Kun cycle, kanang this is not yet a model of understanding which is mature enough to solve the field's main problem. A model may be close, it may be promising and thus be attracting plenty of followers. But again, this is not the real science or normal science. So I will give you an example, a concrete example, kanang in which we can see kanang paradigm shift, no? So ang pre-science, kadumdum mo, during COVID, daghan gi-introduce ang mga tao, no? Kanang uban mukaon daw o moinom daw og limonsito, moinom og limon. Ang uban, there was a time nga ang saging sa carbon, okay? Naay nagpauna-una nga ang tambal daw sa COVID kay saging. Kunya ang atong napuntay mga government official nga ga-introduce og tuob. So lain-lain tag ganang tinuuhan during that time. And then we cannot consider those practices as normal science, but rather pre-science. Moingon lang tanga ka ng it may be close to so. Kaya ang problem ko ato is we're looking for kanang a potential perhaps drug or medication to treat COVID patients. So mao na ang atong problem diha. The surging cases of COVID cases. And so we need to look at for different ways, medical kanang practices nga pwede na to magamit para masolve atong problema sa surging cases, COVID cases. So katong nagto nga kato akong gipang-ingon katong saging, lemon, limonsito, tuob, ug unsa pa inyong nahuna-hunaan or na-observe sa una, pre-science to siya. Pre-science because again, there was no kanang empirical evidences, there was no empirical studies conducted that would tell us otherwise nga effective dun siya. In other words, ang katong mga testimonies are just testimonies, and we know so well that in the context, I mean, for scientists, kanang di na sila mutuog kanang chismis, no? They always want hardcore facts, hardcore evidences. Otherwise, if chismis na, so it doesn't have space in the discipline. Okay, so the next one is normal science, which is now officially the first step of Kuhn's cycle. So the cycle was first described in Thomas Kuhn's seminal work, The Structure of Scientific Revolution. So they begin in pre-science where they have a problem or area of interest but are unable to make much progress. When at last they have a guiding model of understanding, which Kuhn called the field's paradigm, they advance to normal science where they remain most of the time except when their paradigm undergoes a cycle of paradigm revolution. Okay, so if I will ask you, unsa ang paradigm, unsa ka ang paradigm sa ani nga problem sa katong surging COVID cases? Unsa man ang paradigm atong unsa ang paradigm to resolve such scenario? Unsa man ang paradigm nato diha aron? Anybody?
Kuan, sir.
Asa man dito, Kimberly?
Kanang magmas.
Okay, I will consider that one. That's a very good take pod. Okay, ang paggamit og mask. Okay, ato na dawaton. Okay, sige. Other? Okay, Shane.
Vaccine, sir.
Okay, very good. So, vaccine. Mangutana ko nimo later on, Shane ha. Mangutana sa ko ni Mary Ams on sa iyahang matubag.
Kuan, sir, follow sa protocol.
Okay, katong minimum health standards, Mary Ams, no? Okay, that's also very good. Pero balik ko ni Kuan ni Shane, kay gano'n nakaingon siya nga vaccine.
Yes, sir.
Nga nakaingon na ka Shane nga vaccine ang paradigm dito.
Because I think, sir, it is proved, sir, na it is one of the most effective, sir, for a defense for COVID-19.
Okay, precisely, Shay. No, kay otherwise, ang gobyerno di na sila mag-endorse nga mag-vaccine ta if in the first place di na effective. Okay, I'd like to
Yes,
listen.
sir.
Balik ko sa imong answer, Shay, na. But your response is actually brilliant. So that's actually what I'm looking for, no? But I'm not saying nga di sayo tong giingon ko ano. Kay at some point to tinuod man jud even karon gamas ka man gihapon ta. Mo lang ang pinaka-popular pero kanang usa pa, but we need to understand nga ang mask ang itong minimum health standards are also considered as paradigm. Kaya di man pagta pwede pakapante just because nga vaccinated ta, no? Sige, Patrick, do you have something to add?
Wala day sir.
Sige, sige. Okay. So mga to siya, no? So we consider the vaccination programs as the normal science. So over time, no, kanang mo jud na kanang di ba na grabe ka stigma sa kanang dili vaccinated. So kay we believe man nga ang maghatag na tong defense ang vaccine jud. So again, we consider or we associate vaccination as the normal science, as the paradigm which we can think of when dealing with COVID cases. So over time, it may undergo model drifting. So this is a second step of Kuhn cycle. And the cycle starts in normal science where a field has a model of understanding that works. But when issues, problems, or phenomenon appear that the model can no longer handle, so the model begins to drift away from normal science. So ang point ani is we tend to question the paradigm because of these issues, because of these problems. But to balik ko sa vaccine, no? When is the time that perhaps mo undergo ang vaccines o model drifting? Okay, we consider vaccines as the model. So, kanus akha, may tabo na siya nga naay model drifting. Same example katong COVID gihapon with vaccines being the normal science. I would like to share.
Sir.
Okay, so Kimberly out. Kinsa mata si kuan ari sa tani ni Den. Sige Den.
Kuan sir katong related sa vaccine sir no. Katong may mga chika-chika ba nga namatay tungod sa vaccine like natiwasan noon imbis maayo.
Okay. Wala akong gihanap ka answer ko din, no? Very good. So, it's very sensible dyan nga. Posible dyan na nga. Unsa pa, posible dyan nga. Kana, unsa pa, mauna ang mga rason nga murag, kung sa kuan pa, murag natay trust issue, no? Because of kaning mga Hershey's, mga chika-chika. Pero di po na ito ma-discount dito ang kanang kuat. Kaya wata kabalo po na matay na tungod sa vaccine dyan, no? Pero katong giingon ni Den, it's very sensible. Nga ana dyan na siya, no? And that is one reason, one of the reasons nga perhaps the vaccination programs that we have is put into question nga effective jud ni siya kanang is it worth kanang does the benefit outweighs the risk? Kaya basig noon ba nga kanang nakaayo matod siya pero in the long run namatay na daw gihapon kano, so mauna nga kanang that is a time that kanang we tend to question the paradigm, the model, and so it undergoes model drifting. Okay, so the next to model drifting is we have kanang model crisis. So this is the third step of Kuhn cycle, and in this step a field's model of understanding has drifted so far that the field is thrown into crisis because they can no longer make rational decisions. So their foundations for solving their central problems has been shattered by discovery of too many anomalies which their central theory could no longer explain. And at this point in the cycle, the field's energies are best spent constructing a new model that works. Okay, my question is, how is model crisis different with model drifting? Sige, kinsa may ganahan, kinsa may sabtan, di ba? Balik ta, di ba sa model crisis na sa model drifting na mga anomalies, no, na mga issues, na mga problems. But how is it different in model crisis? From the word crisis, so we assume nga naragyapon tong mga anomalies, no? What do you think is, how are they different?
Ako, sir. I think they are very different because in model drifting, it was minor issues that was kind of very solvable, and now in model crisis, it had grown into a much bigger problem that created much more issues that was difficult for anyone to handle.
Okay, very good. That's one. So, kung atong tanawon ang scale sa problem, scale sa issue, during model drifting, gamay-gamay na siya, no? Pag model crisis, dako na siya, sa kadako niya, kanang it's very kanang I mean it's no longer a question whether atong ipadayon kung sa vaccine na gyapon ta, it's no longer a question if atong ipadayon ang vaccination program or dili, because certainly ang answer is di na to ipadayon. Okay, and aside from that, there is other thing nga naa pa jud unique or inherent sa model crisis. Thank you ato Shane. Thank you, Shane. Shikaina. Shikaina naman to. Shikaina naman
Sir.
to.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you ato Shikaina. Naapa jud na usa nga ako gusto madunggan sa inyo ha. Unsa man kaha? Unsa may
Napa ko na sir. I think ang
Sige.
ilang temporary solution, sir, dili siya for ideal for long-term solution for the problems.
So what do they do?
They can't come up with any rational solution mo nang kanang ni avert ang situation, sir.
Okay, precisely. So, aside from the fact nga ang scale sa problem is no longer kanang within the bounds of our capacity, ang ilang buhaton ani is rather than holding into that, dili na sila mohanap na lang sila og other potential solution, which is motong giingon ni Shikaina. So, kanang mo na di na lang sila magkuan, di na ang energy nila, di na exhaust ato unsa unto pag I mean, they don't have to dwell on that, so they have to exhaust their energy in in looking to some other problem nga posible nga mo sa pa nga ilang magamit. By the way, class, no, kanang nanay diri si kuan si Jane Simon that kanang they are going to create a new model. So if na side effect ang vaccine, sir, so sa model drifting kay ma-solve ra, pero sa model crisis kay dili na. So kung atong mobalik ta sa katong giingon nga kuan nga vaccines, so unsa bilang buhaton? If they're going to kanang to look for another model, what does it mean? They're going to look for another vaccines. So karon, class, no, we understand nga daghan klase ang vaccine nga available nato karon, no. Diba na ay mga Pfizer, Sinovac, sa panang uban diha, no. So we can consider them all as actually kanang different, I mean, one paradigm kay vaccine ra man na sila, but they come in so many phases. Kanang they intend to solve one problem, but again, kanang the vaccination program in general is the paradigm. Okay, so after that, we go to model revolution. So, ako sa nipabasa. Kindly read. Sa pabasahon na ni. John Lister. Sige, John, kindly read. Saan na sa slide?
Asa, sir?
Kanis sa model revolution.
Model revolution is the fourth step of the cycle. In this step, a field's model of understanding is undergoing revolutionary change. The old model failed, which caused the model crisis step. The model revolution step begins when one or more competing new models emerge from the crisis.
Okay. So what does it mean, John? So may itong makuha sa model revolution. So may tabuan ni. Atong ibalik natin sa vaccine lang gyapon no para kanang atong example ay consistent siya. Sige Jan. Nakay matampo ani Jan?
Ito.
Sige. I will give you a hint, Jana. We can focus on the last line of the first paragraph.
Ako, sir.
Kuan sir, kanang changing
Sige,
sir.
Jan. Okay. Also make a change, Jan. Yes, it's actually leading to that. So also may nahitabo diyan, dapita Jan.
Mo evolve sir.
Okay. In particular, unsa may mga unsa may nahitabo ng mga unsay possible nga mga scenario ang mahitaboan ng dapita. You made mention
In
about
relation sa COVID nga vaccine, sir?
in relation sa COVID nga vaccines.
The latest ko nila, sir, kay wala na fully vaccinated na term. It's kanang follow-up shots na daw, and kuan na lang, focus na lang sa bagong plan, which is kanang safe ta mag interaction sa kanang other people.
Okay. Sige. I'll take that. Pero other ka ng kuan, wa mo kabati sa news, sige pangbuhat sa US after vaccines, di ba? Iturok man ang vaccines, no? So, that's prevention. So, sa gibuhat nila karon, they're trying to create or develop. So, develop nila. Ewan ko maingon niya ang vaccines dili effective ha. But there are things nga kanang kay di ba we actually think this one nga there is actually crisis. Kay di ba kasabot man ta nga daghan kayo kanang anti-vax. I'm not even certain nga if tanan mo diha vaccinated mo basig na uban nga dili ka vaccinated no. Although dinhi mo choice kay basig imong mama maingon nga vaccine ka kanang kuan kanang dinata ka i-consider nga anak nako ano so posible na mga factor man gud na or basig ikaw kanang naka mga inhibitions no pero ako maingon sa vaccine jud mo kay inyo man na prerogative no kay inyo man na lawas so in response ana unsa may gipangbuhat kay ang uban di mo vaccine jud seret ako na lang kabantay mo na po nag-fund ang kaning mga pharmaceutical industries to develop drugs. So, ang uban nga wala makuan, wala mabaksinan simbako na COVID, ang buhaton develop og drugs para ayuhon na lang sa murag kanang instead nga baksinan ba kanang ayuhon na lang if ever nga mahitabo na siya no. So kanang over time no kanang sa model revolution manggod there could be so many kanang other alternative ways kay posible jud nga sooner or later ma-phase out ang vaccination unya lahi na pod and we consider this one as model revolution because not only kanang kato akong giingon nga drug posible na pa ng mga alternative options and these are considered as competing new models. So mo nang gitawag nga model revolution. Assuming lang siguro nga ang vaccination ni fail siya kay let's say mo lagi to biski daghan na lumas daghan na noon na sa pa nagsakit. So that leads us to paradigm change. So assuming ang vaccination is never effective, so mao to model revolution, we get to look for other kanang we're busy developing drugs. So eventually ang katong drugs nga i-develop would in turn become the normal science and that leads to paradigm change. So mao na siya. In that regard, paradigm change is defined as the fifth and final step in Kuhn's cycle, and earlier steps have created a new model of understanding. And then, again, we consider this one as a new paradigm. So if ever magaling puhon-puhon wala na ng mga vaccines, kanang naanay ka ng medicine or drugs, jod nga atong imno na lang, and now we consider those as the the new paradigm, and in that regard, there is now paradigm change. Okay, so sabot ra ta?
Sir, na ko'y question, sir ba? Unsa ganitong model crisis, sir?
Ang model crisis kanang sa pa di ba ang sa pa ang model crisis, di ba during model drifting kanang naay mga anomalies, pero anomalies ra siya. During model crisis, we initiate to create solutions. So, and aside from that, in model crisis, di na ma-handle ang diba, balik ko na ako sa model drift, no, diba? Model drifting kay nay problem, nay mga issues, anomalies, but what mo hatag attention ana, we just acknowledge, we just recognize nga nay problema, nay side effect ang vaccine. But in model crisis, ang side effect is no longer tolerable kay bisig nangamatay na da ito. And because of that crisis, again, ang atong solution ana is, ang question ana is, ato ba padayon ang atong vaccine paghihapon if daghan nga matay? So mao na nga, ang mahitabo, di na jud na moingon nga ato pa i-consider, no, rather i-stop ang vaccination program, no. Kasi wako magkuan sa inyong kuano, ay political scenario ra ni siya ha. So i-stop nato kay di naman a question whether to continue or not. Kaya apparently ang question is to know, is to not, is to stop. And so during this time pod, we started to look for another kanang intervention or to look for another model. So kanang in a sense na natin ka ng mga initial steps na natin ipang buhat kay mo to, we recognize nga di naman pwede gamitin ang katong previous model, or kung sa vaccine pa dapat stop naman ang vaccination program. Na-answer na ko imong pangutana, Kim?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Sige. Katagan ta mag-practical na example ani ha mo rig uyab-uyab. Ang pre-science, daghan ka og crush. So, posible man jud na, ano? Pag normal science, sa iyong mga crushes, so, pili kag usa. So, normal na siya kay, kung may magkuyog kaon, study, usa pa. Basta kuyog di mo sa tanang butang. And then, kita kag di maayo. Sa mo to siya, ay, kanahugawan mo to siya. So, question ka, diba? There is now an issue. So, mag-question kasi mong gugma niyan, mo dyan niya kung uyogo niya, hugawan man. So, model drift na siya, no? Model crisis, kitaan pa dyan, di mo di hugawan, no? Bakapon pa dyan, cheater. So, dahil crisis ka na hitabo, no? So, naghinahin na po ka mabalik, ito mga crash sa una, no? Huwag ka na pagkuan, kasi ako ni mga pulihan. And then, eventually, gabuwag dyan mo. Kaya hindi naman ako kaya. Pag model revolution, you entertain a lot of suitors na po, kay you're trying to look for a replacement. So, whatever yung mga pilian dito, amo itong paradigm change. So, may paradigm change. So, over time, normal science na po, no? Pero applicable na if di pa kami minyo, ha? Minyo na ka din na pwede. So, ana na ang paradigm shift, no? Kanang, when we talk about relationship, iba sig, pwede na di ay paradigm shift sa ito kinabuhi ingon ni sir. So, kanang bisag ninyo na ko magtaghan ng ihapon ko. So, di na siya pwede ha. Applicable na siya if kanang teenager pa ka. Kasabot na? Okay ra?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sige. So now, we go to intellectual revolution. So, we have mag-discuss, sir. Ato na i-discuss in the context of science. So, para ma-convince mo nga, na di paradigm shift, no? So, we begin with the Copernican Revolution. So, di ba, nakalimot, kasi ito na ingon ganun itong flat earth gani, murag si Koan, matalik mo sa, kalimot ko, si, ingon flat earth. Ikaw ba to, Kim? Or si Koan, si Shane?
Round Earth, yes, sir.
Kinsa man tong gakuan og round earth? Si Shane? Or ikaw, Kim?
Di ako, sir.
Kinsa man to gaingon og flat earth pa? Kalimot ko to. Anyway, one of you mentioned about katong flat earth. Okay, so actually kanang duol na sa kaning Copernican revolution. So, what is Copernican revolution? So, it is actually considered a paradigm shift because from Ptolemy's model of heavens, which he described the cosmos, the cosmos as having Earth as stationary, and therefore it's at the and also at the center of the universe. So from that belief, it changes, or it was replaced with the heliocentric model, with the sun being the center of the solar system. And take note that this is not even the center of the universe. So this revolution consisted of two phases, the first being extremely mathematical in nature, and the second phase starting in 1610 with the publication of pamphlet by Galileo, and beginning with the publication of Nicholas Copernicus, the revolution na, basta, ano na siya, natin na siya. Contributions to the revolution continued until finally ending with Isaac Newton's work over a century later. So kung atong tanawon, mao ni siya ang Ptolemy's model of heavens. So kani siya, yellow represents the sun, blue represents the earth, and kaning red represents Mars. So at left, we have Copernicus heliocentric motion. So mao ni siya ang kang Copernicus, and at the right is the geocentric motion, which is the model of heavens by Ptolemy. So that includes as well the retrograde motion of Mars. For simplicity, Mars' period of revolution is depicted as 2 years instead of 1.88, and orbits are depicted perfectly circular or epitechoid. Okay, but our focus here is actually the position of the Earth and the Sun. So sa una, ang gituuhan sa mga tao was Earth was stationary. It's at the center of the universe, and instead sun revolving around. Instead of the idea nga the Earth revolves around the sun, ang sun ang revolve around the Earth. Actually, class, naani siya kanang gitawag nga kanang explanation ngano ang ato ang pagsabot sa mga tao sa una. Well, nito ganito. Ang usa sa mga rason is that nito manggod ta nga ang tao sa una Ginoo. So gabi kayo pang entitled ang mga tao to the point nga kato ilang entitlement ilang nabutang pa ila pa na-apply sa astronomy. So mao na nga syempre if kanang entitled ka, so self-centered ka. So that explains nga nung nituupod sila nga ang center sa solar system or sa universe kay ang kaning tawag ani kaning ang Earth. Kaya dapat tagapuyo dere. But over time, niabot ning model of kaning heliocentric model ni kaning Nicholas Copernicus. But you know what, class? It doesn't come very easy. Kanang naana na siya nga model pero wala ma-produce or ma-release dayon ma-publish ni Copernicus kay ang kalaban mo gud niya during that time was actually ang church. Kay mismo gud ang church ang gapauna-una kapatuo-tuo sa mga tao nga kita ang Earth ang center sa solar system. So mora man gud na nga if mohatag ni si Copernicus sa iyang model, ang tendency di lang ang mokontra sa iya, di lang ang mga tao but even the church ang kalaban niya. And we know so well nga grabe ang influence sa church before and even now, di ba? Na mga church, mga religious sector nga mag-endorse og kanang politiko. So mao na nga issue jud na siya, class. Kaning mao na nga kanang dako siya nga issue nga dili sayon mag-introduce og new model if kabalo ka ang kalaban nimo ang church mo tubay ang mga tao sa kaning simbahan jud. So mao na nga it matters so well. Okay, the other one is Darwinian Revolution. So again, ay paradigm shift aniyo because from geocentric it moves to heliocentric. The next one is Darwinian Revolution. Okay, so I will not read everything which is stated here. I will proceed directly to the illustration. So familiar na to ang kanang survival of the fittest, no? Which of course kay na may biology, no? But I think less popular is the work of Lamarck. So actually, before ang idea ni Darwin, naanay ka ng idea po ni Lamarck. So Lamarck's theory was on Lamarck's theory focused on use and disuse. Okay, so we're going to use one example which is about giraffe. So, ang atong tan-awon ani is nganong ang giraffe taas og liog. Bitaw no nganong taas og liog di ay mo tanas ako before kumata explanation ani. So kasi ganahan mo volunteer nganong taas ang liog ka giraffe. Sa may ganahan mo share diya ba?
Basig taas ang kahoy, sir.
O sige, nga naman ay Patrick. So kung taas ang kahoy, yung sa may tawag Patrick, ganun mo taas pa ilang liog. Kasi may connection sa taas ng kahoy o taas ng liog.
Kuan, sir, mainat. Ilang liog.
Okay. Well, actually katawanan siya, pero ang imong giingon is it's actually sensible. Naanay ka ng scientific nga o sa pang I mean kanang there is actually scientific, I mean it has kanang scientific grounds ato jud na siya ma-consider. So mataas iyang liog. So aside sa explanation ni Patrick, napay lain explanation nga nung taas ang liog sa giraffe.
La food, sir, pero abot sila.
Sa Jetray?
Ilang food, pero abot sila.
Okay. It has something to do with the access for food, no? So sa kataas, need nila mo taas og ilang liog pod, otherwise is nakaabot. Okay, sige. Thank you, Jeffrey. Awan, nakapasig na apay makikatampo.
Kuan, sir, para silang kuan survival or defense nilang kagalingon.
Okay. That's also a very sensible answer, no? It has something to do ni Darwin, no? It has something to do with their survival, no? So if di sila taas og di ay, so di sila fit sa environment. Mo ba nang pasabot, Darwin? Silence means yes lagi. Okay. Sige. Ato na himay-himayon no katong ilang gipag-ingon kay actually ang ilang gipang tubag sakto dito tanan. So sa theory ng Lamarck niingon siya nga if we don't use a certain part of our body, it becomes a vestigial structure. Meaning to say kanang wala siya pose. So posible nga mawagtang siya. So dire sa illustration, we understand nga there are two kanang sources of food. Ang usa, ang grasses ay kaduha ang kaning kahoy, kaning leaves sa kahoy. So if mubo ang liog sa giraffe, ang ilang syempre ilang makabuot is kanang nasa ground. Over time mahurot ni siya. So ang ilang next resort is to access katong leaves sa kahoy. So was sila lain choice, but ang ilang liog ilang pa binaton. So sa permanent binat na develop ang ilang organ, mo lagi nga use and disuse siya. Kay if di mo gamiton ay mag-visual structure, it becomes useless. So chances possibly mawagtang na siya. Pero pag permanent mo gamiton, ma-develop na siya. O taas na siya. So ikaw, if always ka mamupya, imong liog nagtaas-taas na siya, posible jud nga kana ang mahitabo kana mo na siya kanang motaas na siya. Unya that explains nga taas ang liog sa giraffe kay pag taas sa ilang liog, that attribute is passed down from one generation to another. So mao na explanation ni Lamarck. So mabalik sa ko sa kato akong giingon nga vestigial structure. Kabante mo ang lubot ninyo, di ba naay kanang naadihay kanang bukog sa tip ana gitawag na ka coccyx or coxae. Ang gituhan mo gud sa una ang tao naay kanang tail. Nya di man wa man gamita. So mao na nga kiwa man gamita nahimog vestigial structure nya mo to nawagtang dud siya. So mao na nga karon na ay remnant pero wa ta kita nga naay kanang basta pa na ay tail ang tao. So balik ko sa giraffe no, kinitaas ba ng liog because of the call of kaning nature, they have to respond to the environment. So mao na nga this long neck of them is passed down from one generation to another, and that explains karon nga di ta kita og giraffe nga mubo og liog. So, okay. Now, how is it different with the theory of Darwin? Kang Darwin, lahi ang iya ha. To him, there are two kinds of giraffe, short neck og long neck. O sa ganito, ang term sa kaning theory ni Darwin, akang landmark survive out, ako nag-iingon. So, akang landmark theory of use and disuse, akang Darwin is survival of the fittest. Meaning, if you're not fit in the environment, you will not survive. So, in this case, ang dili fit sa environment is apparently katong mga mubo og liog. Kaya mahulot man lagi ang pagkaon sa ubos. So, they need to access katong pagkaon sa taas. So, ang mabilin is certainly ang katong mga taas og liog. Kaya mamatay man to ang mga mugbo og liog. So, over time, wa na may mugbo nga liog. So, ang gene pool, taas og liog na lang ang tanan. So, ang naitabo, wa natin nakitaan nga mubo og liog nga giraffe. So, mauna ang paradigm shift. No? But you know what, guys? Tingnan ko sa inyo ganina nga. Not all paradigms are actually kanang replaced. Some are just added. The term there is paradigm shift lang because we can never hide the fact nga ang Darwin theory is more popular than the work of Lamarck. Kuha? Kuha na?
Yes, sir.
Sige, it's already time. Attendance pa ko. We'll just have to continue
Yes,
this
sir.
one. Next meeting. Gamay naman nga slides and then I will give you a quiz after next meeting. So the same, we're going to meet on Wednesday. By the way, kanang ako na po, please remind me ragod sa report sa group 1. Kanang because after this one, maghatag ko og quiz and then we'll have group 1 to do the reporting sa mamanito kanang namang share po na may tampo po. Sige, attendance ako ha. Oh.
1, sir.
Sige. Sige, go ahead, Siren.
1,
2,
3,
4, 5,
6,
7,
8,
9,
10,
11,
12, 13,
14,
15,
16,
17,
18, 19,
20,
21,
22,
23,
24,
25.
26,
27,
28,
29,
30,
31,
22,
53,
34,
35,
36,
37, 38,
39,
40,
41, 42,
33,
44,
45,
46,
47,
48, sir.
49,
38,
49,
sir,
Velasquez, sir.
percent.
50, sir.
49, sir, Velasquez, sir.
okay, 49,
50.
okay. Sige, 49 is percent. Sige, that's all. I'll see you next week and have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye, sir.
Bye, sir.
Bye,
Thank
sir.
you.
Bye, sir. Good night, sir.
Sige, good
Bye,
night,
sir.
good night.
Bye, sir. Bye, Camille. My crush.
Thank you, sir.
38, sir. Og 5, sir, present.
Okay. So 38 is present. And 5, Nasif.
23 sad, sir.
Si Balboa, nasa 33.
Hi, sir.
Okay. Sige.
Sir, galibog na ko, sir ba? Kay
Shout
daan
out kay
number
Shay.
37. Naad. Wala ko kanumdumon sa ko nga number.
38 og
Angeli, wait sa sa pero no Angeli?
Ramos, sir.
Ako 39 ya. Ako wig X dere. 39 ka.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Sige.
Sir, present 23, sir.
Okay.
Sir, 12, sir, present.
38 and 5, sir, present.
12, 38. Okay ra mo sa 38. Si 5 po present.
3, sir, present.
32, sir.
32 is present ra. Present ra po. Good evening for 7 to 8. Please give me a minute ha can you give me 3 minutes? Mas ako tubig ha. Yeah. Ay, ba tapos niya. Kana ako po ang record so ninyo. I'll get back. Stay put sa mo.
Hey guys.
Kadungog naman ako.
Yes sir, madungog ra sir.
Wala.
Yes, sir. Madungog ka, sir.
Okay. Sige, last meeting. Wait, ako tanawa itong record niya. Okay. So last meeting we were able to finish the first topic. So if you recall, we discussed on the interaction of science, technology, and society. No, so just a brief recall. We discussed several definitions regarding science and technology, and then we discussed how science and technology are related or are connected with respect to the different views of the different authors. And one of the famous one is the work of Gardner. And if you recall, there were four sort of relationship which he presented. Itong idealist, demarcationist, materialist, and idealist, materialist, demarcationist, and interactionist view. Okay, so after that, we discussed on several pitfalls or limitations, and likewise, we discussed on several on the advantages of science and technology, and in particular, how they are how are they are benefiting the society. And the last topic which we discussed, or we wind up with, how science and technology informs policy making. And also, if you recall, one of the things we discussed in the previous meeting is on how scientific knowledge or how science and technology change rather over the course of time. No, in particular, talking about scientific knowledge, the things that we know today actually changes. These are modified, and these are for greater good. They're not just change because trip lang nato, no? They have to, because that's how science progress or mature. Okay, so this time we're going to discuss about the mechanisms of these changes. And so we'll talk on paradigm shift. Okay, so what is paradigm shift? What is paradigm? Sige, before mo discuss rather of paradigm shift, I would like to solicit ideas from you about your understanding of the term paradigm. So don't give me the definition of paradigm shift, ha? Paradigm lang sa anybody. Kinsa may ganahan mo share ba?
Model, sir.
Okay, Jan. Sige, Jan. It's a model. Can you give me a specific example, Jan? How come it becomes a model? Or maybe a situation or a scenario that represents a paradigm being a model?
A typical example or pattern of something.
Sige, sige.
Something.
Okay, I'll take your words, John. So it's a model, and these are also pattern. Okay, thank you, John. How about Anthony?
Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes. Pero medyo hinay imong kuan, imong audio.
How about now? Okay na?
Kana.
So typically a paradigm, as what the previous gentleman mentioned earlier, is more like a pattern. And for example is life. You grow up, go to school, go to work, grow old, and die.
Sige, sige. That's a very practical example, no? It's a pattern. Tinuod na siya, no? Whether we like it or not, kanang abog ba sa kalibutan, no? Lumalabay rata, no? So from dust, ingon pa sa Bible, no? So from dust you are made, to dust you are returned. Okay, thank you so much, Anthony, no? Kanang tinuod na siya. Mao na ang pattern sa atong kinabuhi, bali, Anthony, no? Sige, sige. Thank you so much. Okay. Sige, mangutan na pa kog lain, no? Basig na ganahan mo share, no? But anyway, thank you, Ato Anthony, no? Sige, isa pa ganahan mo share diha. Sige, wala na siguro, no? Silence means yes lagi. Sa no di ay. Sige. Anyway, for now, we are going to discuss also the paradigm, no? Who popularized the term paradigm? So paradigm, before that, this is our objective. We're going to identify paradigm shifts in history, because ang paradigm shift, good, it doesn't happen just at present where we see a lot of things kinang introduced. So paradigm shift happened before, certainly karon, and definitely it will also happen in the future. So over time, no, there will be paradigm shifts. Okay, so what is paradigm? According to Thomas Kuhn, later on I will discuss to you who Thomas Kuhn is and what is his contribution with respect to paradigm shift. So Thomas Kuhn suggested that a paradigm includes the practices that define a scientific discipline at a certain point in time. So sa giingon pa din ganina ni Jan, so these are patterns, these are models, which definitely these terms are associated. In other words, those words mentioned by John are actually correct. So also, Anthony can define paradigm as kanang patterns. Okay, but one thing that we have to consider, we have to take a look into is that it's only applicable or it's only true at a certain point in time. So siguro balik sa katong gihatag ni Anthony ng example, no, nga ang tao kanang kanang, well, over time, no, kanang bata ta mo eskwela niya pakasal, trabaho, matay, no? So that's the pattern, no? Pero kung atong tan-awon kanang it changes at a certain point in time, hindi man ka always bata, no? Di ka always kanang nagtrabaho. Sooner or later mo retire jud ka, no? So in that sense, there is a pattern. At the same time, there are changes in different course of time. Okay, so it's also a comprehensive model of understanding that provides a field's member with viewpoints and rules on how to look at the field's problems and how to solve them. So sa kaniyang statement plus, it gives us an idea that different individuals, especially different professions, would have different takes on certain things, no? So, muna good tong as no atong example ani, no? Naka-example ato katong mga engineers ba, no? Line engineers nagsakay og usa ka sakyanan. Yeah, let's say na ay electrical engineer, na ay mechanical engineer, let's say na ay ka ng computer engineering po, no? Assuming nga na ay ka ng mga cars nga computer operated. So if ang car mo automatic na og stop, let's say naguba, so ang katong tulo ka engineer would definitely have different kanang take ato, no? In other words, posible nga lain-lain ang ilang hunahunaan nga problema sa car. No? Kung kay katong electrical engineer, ang iyang hunahuna or ang iyang hunahuna battery jud, basig nalobat ang battery. Pero katong mechanical engineer, ang tanaw niya is ang makina. So that explains nga if we are into different professions, well, we would have different concentrations, we would have different focus, and certainly you would have different contributions. Muna nga, sa okay, ang ato mga batasan no kay kanang natay kanang gitawag nga kanang intellectual communication gani nga feeling nato mas bright ta ani as compared ato ng mga profession. Kanang feeling po nato nga mas dato ta ani nga profession as compared ato nga mga profession. So dito intellectual communication, pride to siya, no? But balik ko sa intellectual communication, kay whether we like it or not, no, naamon jud na kabantay mo ka ng mga millennials karon like sa inyo no, mga post moingon nga perting lusura sa among kuan sa among course. I don't know if that's still kanang kuan, if that's still kanang pride or self-entitlement nga we want to voice out to the people around us nga mas bright kay mas gusto atong gistabihan, no? which is as much as possible mo di part na nga thinking, no? Okay, we have different contributions in the community, and certainly whatever your contribution is unique, it's inherent in your field, and kanang we don't have the monopoly of knowledge no nga ato ana tanan, so we have to recognize expertise of the others. So mo na nga dito po tawag kaingon nga ang ato rang lisod, no? Kay kanang uban po na sila mga silent battles nga nagalisod po na sila, no? Dahil siguro sila nga naka-vocal as we are, as you are. So mao na siya, no? So but balik ko, no? So mao to, if you belong to this group of disciplines, so certainly you have your own set of paradigm. Okay, so paradigms gain their status because they are more successful than their competitors in solving a few problems that the group of practitioners has come to recognize as difficult. So, mao ni siya, that leads us to paradigm shift. Okay, because namigiyang diri nga, they gain their status because they are more successful. So, most likely, there's already an existing paradigm, but because they're more popular in solving a particular problem, or whatever ways they're popular, so they're introduced, and that leads to paradigm shift. So paradigm shift, as I said, was introduced or was coined by Thomas Kuhn. So kinsa man si Thomas Kuhn? So he was a trained physicist, but in the latter part of his life, he became a philosopher. So he is famous of his book, The Structure of Scientific Revolution. And in this kanang book, according to Kuhn, scientific revolutions involve paradigm shifts that punctuated periods of stasis or normal science. So you know what, no? While we think paradigm shift, not on nakakatawa ko sa gihatag example ni Anthony ganina, because that perfectly fits how we should see kanang paradigm shift. Na di lang siya true sa science, di lang siya true sa math. It has kanang personal implication, practical implication, that even we ourselves, we undergo paradigm shift. Kanang dili man galing siguro kanang sa katong giingon. I mean, katong gihatag ni Anthony is actually correct, no? That's one example. But in some other things, we actually kanang we underwent paradigm shift. The career shift, for example, sa nahitabo sa kinabuhi ni Thomas Kuhn. Imagine from being a philosopher to from being a physicist to a philosopher, in which physics is apparently one of the hardcore sciences. And when we go to philosophy, that's a bit kanang kuan, what if it may hardcore, but sort of kanang it's a social science man gud siya. So kanang again, wala man ta mag-discriminate lagi, but these are two different disciplines. So mao na nga there is kanang paradigm shift even sa kinabuhi ni Thomas Kuhn. Okay. So, moving on, according to his book, which is The Structure of Scientific Revolution, ningon siya nga, the successive transition from one paradigm to another via revolution is the usual development pattern of how science mature. Otherwise, class, if ang atong science, wa na ma-generate ng new knowledge, patay na ang science nato. We're just very much fortunate because from time to time, kanang there is progress, di ba? Ingon pa gani if ako masay ko lang nakoy nabasahan ato nga sa ka-article nga just as we thought nga ang technology is already at its peak, kanang we need to understand nga there's more to come. So tinuod na siya no kay di ba kung atong pagtuo nga kaning usa pa di ba mo to I think nahatag ako na example sa una ang pagtuo na to nga ang metal di na siya mulupad pero kita na nga ang airplane nilupad niya we know nga ang airplane made up of metal. So kanang there is progress in our knowledge and so kanang atong knowledge put into practice mo jud na siya. And so that's how science mature. So mao na nga if tayo ganyan mga inventions, supportaan na sa gobyerno, no? Dito na pwede nga ka nang dinasuportaan. Kaya saan na lang, if nila supportaan, no? Ang uban, na uban kuan, mo ay, mo ba ito nga daghan kay mga scientists, yung mga Pinoy nga mugawas kay, they know that they are well compensated, they are recognized abroad over here in the country. So, bati mo gud ang usap pa, bati mo gud ang atong, bati jud ang landscape sa science sa Pilipinas na kay politika, no? Even atong mga athletes kani politika ho na sila no nakatong EG Ubiena. I don't know if you're familiar with that issue, but anyway we are moving kanang far from the discussion. So balik ko no ngano na paradigm shift. Well, the explanation is very simple. The paradigm faces anomalies, and when there are enough anomalies that accumulate within the field, so there is a need for paradigm change. And then a paradigm shift is not a threat to science, but rather the very manner in which it progresses. Okay, so atong himay-himayon, no? How come nga ang paradigm, or what are the processes or the mechanisms involved for a paradigm to change? Okay, so I wanted to familiarize this model. So there is pre-science, then after pre-science, it undergoes normal science, model drifting, model crisis, model revolution, and towards the end, it undergoes paradigm change. So this is how paradigm shift happens. So we begin with pre-science. So ako sa ni mo discuss na kung later on I will be asking you. So pre-science is not actually part of the paradigm change. Rather, it's just a pre-paradigm change. It's an initial stage, but it's very, very important. So in pre-science, there is not yet a model of understanding. So if you recall, John associated the term paradigm with model and pattern. In other words, we're going to contextualize, or we're going to to contextualize or to define, or instead of using the term paradigm, we're going to use the term model. So in pre-science, there is not yet a model of understanding which is mature enough to solve the field's main problem. So the model may be close, it may be promising, and thus be attracting plenty of followers, but it's not yet the real science that works. So ang akong hatag example ani is katong kasagsagan sa COVID, no? Kadumdo mo, ang nahitabo ato pag COVID, kanang nadinta ang mga tao, no? Kanang lain-lain taog kanang mga pagbuhat. Ang uban gatuob, ang uban gikaon og saging, ang uban gikaon og lemon. I don't know if unsa yung mga practices pod, no? Basta uban dili mo ginhawa aron dili ka makakuan og kaning aron dito maka-inhale og katong virus, no? So mo to ang mga nahitabo sa una, no? Kanang lain-lain tang gibuhat, no? But none of those intervention or none of those medical intervention kay dili man to wala man to mo undergo og kanang empirical study. So nahulog siya kanang pre-science wala man siya, di mo siya ma-consider nga paradigm. Kay in other words kanang sabi-sabi lang baka na mga chismis lang, no? So some of them may be promising and thus be attracting plenty of followers, no? Kadumdum mo niabot ang time nga daghan ka tuob kay ang tuob lagi daw kay epektibo daw, no? Nya naiuban kaon og saging kay effective daw ang saging. So kanang namoingon ta nga it may be close because we're grounding katong giingon nga close with katong chismis or hearsay. So kisa mo mo ingon nga let's say na COVID unya nagtuob niya na ayo. So syempre nga ikaw nakabaw nga nagtuob siya na ayo siya, so magtuob pud ka. So kanang in other words kanang mutuo sa mga tuo lang ba? Okay, so that's pre-science. Okay, so, and again, we don't consider that one as part actually of paradigm change. So after pre-science, it will lead to normal science. So I want someone to read and give me an explanation in relation sa, I mean, I want someone to read this one and give me an example, a line sa atong fokusan kay ang kaning surging COVID cases ha. O niya ang pre-science mo itong mga practices. So sa normal science, atong tan-awon if unsa ang normal science with the surging kanang COVID cases. But before that, I would like to ask someone to read and then siya na po ang muhatag sa iyang pagsabot ani. Okay, we'll have Trisilin, Pania. Sige, Trisilin, go ahead. Kindly read, Sanya. After reading, give me your positions or your understanding. Wala si Trisilin. Okay, let me call on Lance. Sige, Lance. Sige, wala ni ko ana. Silent commit karon. Okay, I'd like to ask for volunteers. For a volunteer rather. Wala yung volunteer? Okay, so ako lang sa. So, normal science is the first step. Again, ang pre-science is not the initial step. It's a preparatory step perhaps, but not the first step. So the cycle was first described in Thomas Kuhn's seminal work, katong iyang libro nga The Structure of Scientific Revolution. So they begin in pre-science where they have a problem area of interest, and that is katong surging COVID cases, whereby different kanang interventions were done, but these interventions are unable to make much progress. So when at last they have a guiding model of understanding, which Kuhn called the field's paradigm, they advance to normal science, where they remain most of the time, except when their paradigm undergoes a cycle of paradigm revolution. So with the COVID cases that we have, what is the norm? How do we combat the surging COVID cases, man?
Ano sir, mag-wear of face mask, dayon magpa-vaccine.
Okay, ikaw to, Jan?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so according to Jan, kaning mag-wear og face mask o magpa-vaccines. Okay.
And so physical distancing po, sir.
Okay, physical na kompletoho no ang minimum health standards. Sige, thank you, Jan. Sige, balik ko sa imong response, anak Jan, no? I'll ask, murag nag-raise niya yung hand si Anthony. Sige, Anthony.
Sir, basically, as what I've read here, it actually says about something that begins in pre-science, where they have a problem area of interest but are unable to make much progress. Then they advance to normal science, where they remain most of the time, except when their paradigm undergoes a cycle of paradigm revolution. Sure, no? So based on my understanding, if you're gonna be talking about COVID in particular, with regards to this topic, is pre-science lang sa when 2 years ago, because basically none of us know what COVID really is. So we're stuck with that. And it advances to normal science since as time went by, as what the previous gentleman mentioned earlier, to combat COVID is where face masks, like social distancing, So as time passes by, it advances to normal science because with certain or researches that was conducted, we had idea of what it is. So it progresses because there were like new variants that were appearing. So yeah, mao mo siguro na.
Okay, okay.
That's
It's
base.
actually sensible, Anthony. So what do we do now to combat?
To combat it, sir, since we're living with COVID, I think not for the rest of our lives, but for a long time of our lives. Basically, we just need to live with it and try to evolve or conduct or come up with something that at least lessens the impact, but be consistent or try to live like somewhat a normal life. Okay,
Okay.
as time passes by, Mangudger, we as time passes by, mas daghan tag mahibaw-an about COVID. And I know for a fact that there are new ways that um that is gonna be invented or gonna be discovered for us to combat this.
And right now, Anthony, what medical intervention do we have?
Um, yeah, vaccines
Okay,
for
very
one,
good.
and
Dapat eh.
then yeah, vaccines for one. Then if there are any variants that are gonna appear, try to come up with something, but I can't specifically give you an answer for that.
Okay, so very good. The responses of Anthony and Jan are actually what I'm looking for, no? So in other words, ang atong normal science karon, kaya di ba ang problem nato is COVID man to, no? So ang atong normal science, what is the norm to combat the COVID cases is apparently ang vaccination program nato. Although we understand there are so many kanang brands of vaccines available in the market today, di ba? Pfizer, Sinovac, AstraZeneca, so on and so forth. Whether whatever brand it is, though, we understand a COVID vaccine is the norm, is the normal science, it's the paradigm as to how we prevent ourselves from being infected with the virus. Okay, thank you so much, Jan and Anthony. Okay, so balik tano. So mopasabot na ani kanang it is now the vaccines, which is the normal science when talking about COVID, and then they would remain most of the time except when their paradigm undergoes a cycle of paradigm revolution. So as long as effective pa ang vaccine, mao na siya ang will last for a long period of time. Okay, so where's paradigm change then? So after normal science, which is vaccine lagi, it may undergo to model drifting, which is a second step of con cycle. And the cycle starts in normal science, where a field has a model of understanding that works. Okay, so the model allows a field's member to solve problem. But when issues, problems, or phenomenon appear that the model could no longer handle, the model begins to drift away from normal science. Okay, so when do you think is the time that vaccines, being the model which we're talking here, would undergo model drifting?
When there's a new variant, sir, that will appear.
Okay, what could likely be the ikaw to Lance?
Anthony, sir.
Sige, Anthony. What could likely be the kuan? What could likely be the response if there are kanang new variants? I mean, how does it affect kanang the existing vaccines that we have?
Actually, sir, as what my friend told me, because she's medical technologist, sir, if there are any variants, good, basically they will mutate. Mausab ang ilang DNA something. Nana, correct me if I'm wrong. So that deficits the vaccines that are created right now. So for example, Omicron is kuan kanang lahi na siya nga DNA. So ang Sinovac is dili kay siya ingon ana ka effective. Whereas if we're gonna be creating a new vaccine that combats that specific DNA that we have, is mana siya imurag o solution to that new variant?
Okay, in other words, we tend to question the effectiveness or the efficacy of the existing vaccines that we have with the emergence or with the emerging variants, no? Sige, sige. That's a very good response again, Anthony Morris. Kami na lang ni Anthony og dyan, istoryahe ani, no? Okay, but kanang again, that's a very good response, Anthony. So we tend to question if effective ba ning vaccine na kanang kuan with the coming of the new variants. Okay, as we know, no kanang when we develop vaccines, to ang atong kuan katong alpha ba ya? We are not developing vaccines because apparently we don't predict that there will be new variants coming in. We have Beta, the Omicron, the Delta, and among others. So, we may question if these vaccines are actually effective. Okay, again, we develop these vaccines for the alpha variants. Katong pinakaunang variant. So, okay, thank you so much, Anthony. That is actually one. Another. Natin, kung mo diha, mag-grado ba ako sa inyong ipanulti, ha?
Sir, minaw rami, sir.
Dahil na mo participate po kay.
Mag-explain naman niya tanan, sir.
Minaw rami ni mo, sir.
Nindot kayo mo inaon, sir. Naiunod ang
sir,
storya ba?
Sige, basta naman ka-share di ay. Anyway, di naman kumakuha niya wrong na yung response. Kaya ito mo doon na ikuan nga ito na moabot na sa saktong response. Sige. Ang ingon gini ni Anthony kay with the coming or with the emergence of the different variants, so kanang we tend to question no if effective ang vaccine. Okay, mao lagi to pang alpha raman to. Napa koy gusto ma-draw out sa inyo. Basta na mo nahuna-hunaan pa. Lawat na jud. Sige na may ganahan.
If ingana, sir, we have to look the data nga gi-release sa mga manufacturers kung unsay mas best silang vaccine nga kini mas better ni siya nga vaccine to fight against the Omicron or protection that kinds of virus bitaw, sir. It's better to look for the what's they call this kanang ang iyang specific not specifications related ana, sir.
Pero dyan, if I may ask dyan, ano sa mga observation ni mo dyan sa like there sa taga Cebu ka dyan?
Taga Misamis Occidental, sir.
Okay. Sa inyo ang context na lang dyan. O sa iyong na-obserbahan dyan after pag-vaccine sa mga tao dyan? Or ang behavior sa mga tao about vaccines?
Behavior sa mga tao about vaccines? At first, sir, wala pa kayo nagpa-vaccine kasi magtuto sila ng mga belief nga mahimod ako ng zombie. Pero after nga kuan kanang na educate ng mga people nga money effects sa vaccine nga maghatag siya best protection, na-encourage na sila nga magpa-vaccine. And isa pod kay kung wala pa kay vaccine dili ka maka-enter sa mga establishments. That's why need jud pod nga nakay vaccination card para makasulod.
Pero nakita na ka dyan o nakita na ka dyan o na zombie dyan?
Wala, sir, so far.
Okay, sige. Ato dyan na i-draw out. Gusto na ko ma-lead sa kanang other nga kanang ko ano, which is very, very practical nga nakapahatag atong question ba if mo vaccine ta or dili, no? So, usa tong zombie, napatay lain nga kanang kuan, napatay lain mga inhibitions or lain nga rason nga nung nakapa-inhibit ng vaccines gawa sa zombie. Nagiingon ni Jan.
Ano, sir? Kanang sa mga kadiguangan, sir, ba? Naday mga nangamatay tungod sa vaccine, sir.
Okay, precisely. Muna akong gihanap, Lance. So, naramang ganit na, Lance. Okay, so Mo pasabot Lance, na question nato ang murag ni usapan ni atong gi-question ang effectiveness kay nakita man tang first hand experiences nga may nangamatay jud no kanang although ba kanang usa pa kanang wa man ta kabalo sa mga rason jud aton no kanang they may have kanang underlying medical conditions mao tong pagpabaksin na nangamatay na noon, but if we know nga effective jud ni siya, nga ideal ni siya, it could not have happened. Am I right, Jan? Am I right ka ng Lance?
Yes, sir.
Okay, in other words, if perfect pa ang vaccine nato, dapat walay issue, walay mga concerns nga ni arise. So balik ta sa kaning model drifting. The moment nga katong giingon ni Anthony nga nakita tag other variants, katong giingon ni Lance, katuldo katong giingon ni Jan na ay kanang zombie, pero wata kitag zombie pa man, so ato lang to i-consider gapon Jano. Pero sa giingon ni Lance, nakita taog kaning kuan, nakita taog kanang nangamatay, which is whether we like it or not, first hand nga manggod nato na mga experiences or the experience first hand dato nga na witness nga na nay tabo no. So that gives that triggers us to question vaccine ko or dili. Kay if again ako na ginaigon ganina, if the benefits outweighs the risk, so we tend to question if vaccine to or dili no kay mga matay na vaccine na gani ka para mabuhi ka niya namatay na nung katungod sa vaccine no. So mao na nga there is model drifting. We tend to question the model if it's really effective or not. So after that would lead to model crisis. So who would like to read and give an explanation on sa ang pagsabot sa model crisis? Mubalik na gyapon ta sa vaccines. So kanus mo undergo og model crisis ang atong mga vaccines nga available sa market karon. Sige, kinsa mabasa ani? Ano ka daw babayan nito background? Sige. Si Leah Jane, si Leia sa atong pangutan. Sige, CJ.
Sir, ang sa question.
Sige, si Jane lang sa taliya kay murag ni participate on it. Na-raise mo tag hand si CJ.
Model crisis is the third step of the Kuhn cycle. In this step, a field's model of understanding has drifted so far, the field is thrown into crisis. Because they can no longer make rational decisions. Their foundations for solving their central problems has been shattered by discovery of too many anomalies their central theory cannot explain. At this point in the cycle, the field's energies are best spent constructing a new model that works.
Okay, sige, CJ. CJ kanang ako lang sure kay basig din mo kanang ko amo ni dahil man nimong first name mo.
Yes sir, nakamalimtan ako i-change permit sa Zoom sir.
Sige.
Automatic man gud sir kada sulod na ako sa Zoom. CJ dahil ang mabutang sa name.
Okay. Ana pwede na mo i-rename. Sige CJ kanang what is your understanding about the paragraph the paragraph that you read?
Sir, kanang because kanang mga dagang tao sir kanang mag-assume na ingana di ay ni napalayo na siya sir sa first idea, padagdag sila og mga information now which in turn palibog na pod sa mga tao sir, gubot na pod sa sa mga pagkasabot sa mga tao.
Okay. So balik ka sa vaccines. Sa vaccine ito imong gimme no. Kanang what could be kanang the scenario if ever manggaling ang vaccines, ma-undergo siya crisis na jud. I mean, di ba, because we associate vaccines as the model that we're talking here. So if it undergoes model crisis, unsa ka posible ang naitabo nga nganong naingon ta nga crisis na jud ni. Di na ni kanang kuan model drifting lang.
Di ba sir, from the base information na ginhatag sa government or scientists, may mga mag-comment sa Facebook post sir Mag-post sila yung idea, yung information. Pag-abot sa comments, sir, ang mga tao naman, sir, napod, sir, kay magdagdag na dangerous ni siya, di siya sure, fake news daw ko, no? Which is, kung ano, sir, dili siya proven ba? Same po tong sa saging na time, sir, indo sila may ano, sir, dagdag na po information, sir, ba? Which in turn causes people na i-doubt ang mga halustanan na information.
Okay, and should we identify that one under model crisis or model drifting?
Can be model crisis, sir. Kasi because of those fake news, mga iba pa, sir, magkagubot na tanan, sir, at mostly halustanan na tao, sir, is dili na matrust and ano na, wala na sila gatrust sa mga ginapang-ingon sa mga tao.
Okay. So there could be kanang powerful reason nga nung di na sila moto ana si Jay. Ako gusto na ko na elicit or i-draw out nagikan sa imuha. Gusto ba kailang na-observe? So yung nakitaan.
Like yung ano, sir, like yun lagi, sir, yung parang yung sa ano, sir, mga prutas daw, sir, may makaano daw sila, effective daw against sa COVID, sir. Pero kung isipin dyan sa, sir, wala man sinabi ang mga scientists, sir, na explicitly na ang certain fruits maka help jud. Maybe it can boost immune system or help your body mismo, sir, pero in regards to the COVID, sir, di talaga silang sinabi.
Okay, sige. Thank you, si Jano. But I'd like to give my comment and we can actually katong imong giingon si Jay, we can actually put that one under model drifting. Kay di ba these are just anomalies, these are just issues kanang we don't know firsthand unsang effect kanang mao na nga we can actually consider that one under kanang model drifting. Kanang although medyo nakalibog siguro ang mga tao, pero murag wala gani enough nga basihan ang ilang pagkalibog, ang ilang pagka-concern or sa
excuse me, sir.
Sige. Thank you, si Jay. I will listen to Leah Jane.
For me, sir, kay kanang sa di ba sa una giingon man nga kanang dili daw pugsanay ang vaccine. Pero karon maka rethink na lang ang mga tao kung dili pugsanay, why ilang manggihimo nga like dili ka sud sa establishment kung dili ka vaccinated, dili ka maka dine in sa kanang mga pagkaunan kung dili ka vaccinated. So ara na magsugod ang murag model crisis, sir, nganong mainana.
Okay. But at that point, we're not actually questioning the effectiveness of the vaccine, no? About ana.
Yes, sir, kanang mo gani, sir, maka-doubt sad ka ba kung effective ba jud na kay murag gihimo na magun lang like ang uban po, sir, negosyo ba na kay nganong
sige, nakuha na ko ang hugot nimo, no? So kanang kung kuan o sa pa murag posible nga na ay business behind ana mo nang gipamugos ana nila no regardless if effective siya or
dili. Yes, ana na, sir, like murag di na magbase ba kung effective ba na siya. Ang imuha lang kay basta makapa-vaccine ka mo na lang na ilaha gani, sir. So magduda jud ka kung unsa man jud ng vaccine.
Okay, sige. So na-turn pod ko no, pwede na ko ibutang sa model crisis, pwede na ko ibutang sa model drifting. Kaya somehow issue ang mangyapon siya, no? Not unless we have kanang hardcore facts nga kanang usa pa nga ato mga doubts tinuod, no? So muna nga pwede ka na ibutang sa model drifting siya, but somehow murag pwede pud siya ma-turn into crisis, no? Kaya actually class kanang we tend to question jud if effective ang vaccines. Balik ko tong giingon sa inyo katong the risk gani, the benefits outweigh the risk. Meaning to say, biski daghan ang maayo, daghan ang nangamatay. In model crisis, it is no longer a question if kanang ang vaccine, if we're going to use the vaccine or not. The fact na daghan ang namatay, kung sa itong buhaton, di ba ato na siya? Putlon. So then vaccine kay kabalo man ta nga mga matay naman di ay. So kanang that makes it a crisis. So actually the difference here between model drifting and model crisis is that in model drifting, murag marites pa gani, marites pa ang approach at ani nga daghan tag mga issue, daghan tag mga hearsays nga batian, but dito mo hatag og kanang extra attention ana. I mean, we don't exhaust our energy into listening into those kanang dramas or whatsoever, no? But in model crisis, we see firsthand nga di siya makaayo kay mo to, instead nga maayo na matay na noon. So there is really a crisis kay kanang there is a need to replace that model or that vaccine in particular, because we recognize nga kanang mo ito kanang na-outweigh man gud ang benefit sa risk. So mo na nga dako siya nga problema. So also in model crisis, the difference that sets it with kaning kuan with model drifting is that we now recognize nga dili ato ondangon ang vaccine, dili siya effective. We started to put our energy in looking for another potential perhaps vaccine, or if not, we're going to develop new drugs. Nakuha ninyo ang difference sa model crisis o sa model drifting? Sabot ra? Sabot ra? Sige. I will take it as yes. Wala man ni kuan, wala man ni no. Sige. Sa model revolution class, mo na siya ang naitabo. So if during model crisis, gahinahinay na taog hanap og another kanang vaccine, ang model revolution, I will define it first. It's the fourth step of Kuhn's cycle, and in this step, a field's model of understanding is undergoing revolutionary change. So the old model failed, which caused model crisis step, and so the model revolution step begins when one or more competing new models emerge from the crisis. So if you recall, in model crisis, naghinahinay na sila og hanap og another vaccines. So ang atong buhaton para makuan as a model revolution, mo na ni ang time nga there will be a lot of kanang new models which will be introduced. So nag-research si China og ani, perhaps other countries would look for another kanang possible nga kanang if di man ganing vaccines, basin drugs na ilang buhaton. Because wala man tabo ingon nga nagalimit tag vaccines, no? There could be other alternative options nga pwede natong tan-awon to treat or to solve the problem we have on hand, or we have at hand. Okay, so when we talk about paradigm change, mo na siya may tabo. Sa model revolution, there will be so many models to be introduced, and we're going to select only one, and whichever is the most popular, whichever is proven based on several empirical studies, will eventually be hailed as the new paradigm. And that leads us to paradigm change. So, katong model nga atong gi-replace sa katong let's say sa vaccine, assuming nga naka-develop ta og drugs in behalf of, as a replacement with the vaccines, so we call it now as the new paradigm or as the normal science. And so, paradigm change happens. Kasabot ra mo, class. Sige, hatag example na.
Yes, sir.
Ato ni ko anong practical. So balik ko sa kuan Nakikuyog din makadog ni siya, mo siya balik-balik ang example, no. So, ang pre-science class, assuming ikaw no kanang daghan tag crush. Crush A, crush B, crush C, crush D. So, prospect ani mo sila, no. So, among all your crushes, manguyab ka og usa, no, assuming gisugot ka. So katong imong crush nga ni oo nimo becomes your girlfriend, and so that's the normal science. So normal naman siya kay mo to may mong kuyog og kaon, kuyog og study, kuyog og ligo, kuyog og unsa pa kuyog og laag, ug unsa pa diha, no. So normal na sa inyo nga it becomes a daily reality, a normal thing nga mo nang kuyog nimo, no. It undergoes model drifting if nakita ka og dili maayo sa iyahan, no. Unsay mga dili maayo? Give me an example nga dili maayo sa imong uyab nga nakita nimo karon nga gahuna-huna ka nga pulihan na nimo kay unsa man ni siya. Sige. Per experience, welcome ko mo kung sa mudawat ko kung sa inyong mga
Maldita,
response.
sir.
Asa?
Maldita, sir.
Okay. Kisa to gayon. Kisa to gayon. Sorry.
Sungkad, sir.
Okay. So, maldita daw, no? Kaning, nga naman na, Kevin ba to? So, sorry, makukuan.
Ken Vincent, sir.
Okay. Ken Vincent. So, nga naman kayo maldita. Tino, mo na experience first hand. So, nagahuna na nakagpulihan.
Oh, maybe, sir.
Hala. Sige. Well, mao ba nga yung model drifting kinakita mga attributes nga dili maayo, no? So kung balik
Yes,
sa back,
sir. At manggawas ng mga tinuod na ano, sir.
Usa ang pagkamaldita napakiraay na kitaan Ken, Vincent na kanang posible makapausab sa imong tuan.
Kana makulbaan inig order, sir.
Nga naman, dili maghuna-huna og kaning so to gaingon ba? Kasi makulbaan if pag-order nga naman kanang dili maghuna-huna sa budget.
Dili, sir, kanang ingnon sa kuan, sir, ba kanang work, sir, ba kay makulbaan gapon siya, sir.
Di ka ba matubang og cashier, sir ba?
Okay. Wala man di
Makulbaan, sir.
Okay. Nga dili ka pornahon sa kuan sa mga mindo nga kanang ano tinuod bitaw na ano. Sige no. Taas sa kanig standard si Andre, no. Okay, si Andre ba to?
Di, example ra na, sir.
Sige. Posible no kay kuan ba na your mouth speaks out from the abundance of your heart. So posible jud na sa mga criteria ni mo Andre, no. If di ka mo mag-order no XX na siya, X na siya, no. Sige no. So mao na ang kanang mga posibleng mga kuan baka na ato makita nga dili maayo sa ang kuna ta nga. Sure jud nga mo na kung pakaslan nga unsa man tawo ni siya oy kanang di mo ka mag-order, no, or kanang maldita kaayo, no, or basig hugawa, no, unsa pa diha, no. Unya model crisis. Unsa may tabo sa model crisis?
Pulihan na, sir.
Pulihan sa dayon, ha. Sige nga nung pulihan
Ay,
man
wala ka plano na, sir, like ano, sir.
Nga nung pulihan naman
Comparing
mo,
sa sample lang, sir.
Nga nung pulihan naman di na ka mag-angot sa kamaldita.
Sir, magduda pa diya, sir. Magduda.
Oo, kana di ba kanang na-trust issue, no? So in other words,
naduha na.
Daghan ka ng issue. Unsa?
Mag-overthink.
Overthink. Tinuod jud na ma-overthinker kay gaghan na. Tinuod jud na mo si. Tinuod jud na lahat to. Mag-overthink, no, kanang in other words ba daghan kay dili maayo, no, kanang possessive, mag-overthink. Kanang in other words ba dili na mo kaya i-handle ang iyang ang iyang mga attributes nga dili maayo. So during model crisis, unsay buhaton boys? Padayon.
Maghuna-huna.
Maghuna-huna nga tagay jud.
Maghuna-huna og kuan, sir, kanang ngitag na yung model, sir ba?
Okay. Pulihan, no, di ba? Ana, pulihan na siya ganoon, ha? Pulihan. So, di jud maghuna-huna. Mo take action sa pulihan na jud.
Sana jud ay cycle, sir.
Na-cycle jud na siya. So kay pulihan naman nimo, di mo jud kakahuwa, di mo jud ka maka-survive if kay uyab, no. So model revolution balik na pud kasi mga prospect ka mga crashes or basig na ay manguyab di mo ba, no. So kabalo ang katong mga kakawalo na may kauban nga pahipi ra pud diha, no, kaangin nimo pagkabugan nga buwag ni sikuan, o di ba? So buhaton atong gahuwat ra nimo, mo to ang discard nimo. So this is the time that you're going to entertain your suitors. And among of your suitors, pili na po kasi ang pulian nimo, sumuon na paradigm change. So, katong paradigm change, mo to ang normal science na po nimo. Pero kanang disclaimer niya, applicable na ni sa inyong mga edad, no? If maminyo na gani, di na pwede basig ba yung nga, ang research kay mo nag-paradigm shift, pwede na puli-puli. So, ako na-apply. So, pwede na if di paminyo, ha? Pero pag minyo na gani, ayun na po mo ingan na mayog walay anak, no? So di na siya maayong buhat. So applicable na siya if kanang di pa kami niyo. So kuha ra,
sir.
Yes, sir. Nagets naman, sir.
Ano dyan na siya, no? So mauna siya nga kanang kuan ha kanang wala alas 8 naman di ay so moel na ano mauna siya a practical example no so madumduman sa ninyo. So karon you have to reflect if napa mo sa model drifting, sa model crisis or basig nag paradigm change dyan mo no. So kanang mauna siya kanang inyohan ng kuan. So atong example ba sa inyo example tong kuan katong ayun na lang, marumundog. So naman. So anyway, mag-attendance ako ha kay. Di na makaya sa oras niya. We'll continue this one next meeting. Attendance ata. After, by the way, after sa akong discussion next meeting, I will give you a short quiz on paradigm shift and interaction of science, technology, and society. Okay, so wait sa ha.
Sir, unsa tayo mag-ingon nga quiz, sir? Kanas ata, sir?
Next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Sige. Wait sa kay nasa ko'y ka na ibutang. Okay. Kanang count off.
1 present, sir.
2.
3 present, sir.
Sir, asa rin na makit-an, sir?
By the way, you don't have to say present now, just say your number. Sige.
4 Adriano, sir.
Okay, so likewise, Mr. Adriano, only say your number. Numbers na ayun, kanang kuan. So if your number is 4, so 4 lang. And that's also true across. I mean, that's true with the rest of you. Sige, we are now at number 4. So
5, sir.
6.
7, sir.
8, sir.
9.
Answer.
11, sir.
12, sir. 13, sir.
14. 15.
16, sir.
17.
17, sir.
Okay. Next. 18. 19.
20, sir.
21.
22.
23. 24.
25.
26.
27.
28.
29.
30.
31.
32.
33.
34, sir.
35. 36. 37. 38.
Go. 31.
39. 40.
Excuse me, sir. Present 31, sir. Na-disconnect ko kayo.
Okay. Sige, nakabantabit ako. 41.
42, sir.
33.
44.
45, sir.
46, sir.
47, sir.
48.
49, sir.
Okay. Last number.
Sir, number 33 daw, sir. Reconnecting daw siya per me, sir.
Sige. Ang katokang Tuesday kay okay na to. Nakabantay ko ga kuan to ga. I think murag kadto ako ga admit. Sige, that's all for tonight. Thank you so much for your time. I'll see you next week.
Excuse me, sir.
Thank you, sir.
By the way, katong
31, sir, present, sir. Na-disconnect ko, sir.
Okay, okay. Okay naman, ako na rectify diri koan. Christian, nakabantay ko. Sige, kanang...
Sir, 31, sir, present.
Oh, yes. Present ra. Sige. Okay,
Sir, 31%.
yeah, yes, Christian. Okay, ako na butang diri present. I was able to notice.
Sir, ang tingog, sir, si Tuesday Lucenio.
Oh, number 31. Okay, si Tuesday at 31 man to siya. How about ang uban? Do you still have concerns? If none, you may leave the meeting room.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
31, sir, present.
Okay na, Tuesday. Okay na diri. Ako na present ka diri sa class record.
Sir, excuse me, sir. About
33%, sir.
30.
Number 30, sir.
30 asa? 30.
30 daw.
30.
Sir, 31, sir, present, sir. Na-disconnect ko, sir.
Oh, present ka diri Tuesday.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. 30 is also present. Sige, I think there's a question.
Quizzes, sir ba? Any man discuss nimo, sir, or mag-post?
Yes. After the discussion.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, welcome. And thanks as well. Kanang, if there's no more question, I think that's all for tonight. And have a good night. God bless. And I'll see
Thank you,
next
sir.
week.
God bless.
Thank you, sir. Goodbye, sir.
Welcome. Bye-bye.